Hello YouTube, this is RL coming to you again from my channel, and welcome back to another installment of Retro Live, where we review video games from the 1980s and 1990s. And once again, here's my good friends CK and co-host CK. I said your name twice.
Yeah, you did. It's all good. Hello everybody. Welcome back.
So we review everything on a love, like, loathe scale with graphics, music, sound effects, gameplay, controls, difficulty, fun factor, and story if applicable. So we're reviewing the classic game from the Super NES, Star Fox.
Released in 1993 and co-developed by Nintendo and Argonaut Software. This game is the first polygonal shooter on the SNES, but from what I had read, it's actually the second developed game using the Super FX chip. It is a fantastic game.
Alright, cool. So Double Love is a 6, Love is a 5, Double Like is a 4, Like is a 3, Half Like is a 2, Loathe is a 1, and Double Loathe is a big fat 0. So let's get started. What do you think of the graphics in this game, CK?
The graphics are nostalgic to me. The game looks like it was built for like an Amiga computer or Commodore back in, the late 80s, early 90s. So it was definitely something new. And this is the first time we're seeing it on a console. I like the graphics. I think it's more the nostalgia than anything, but they're not great. It's very laggy, it's very choppy, obviously due to the processor restrictions on a home console versus a PC. And I would have to give it a like. It is the best that they could do with what they had for that console and the room that they had to build the game. So it gets a like from me.
Alright, awesome, cool. Alright, so yeah, graphics. For me, the game, I believe it's quite groundbreaking. I do feel it's quite colorful. It's something that, wasn't, as you said, very familiar at the time. This was maybe the second game you said that was, kind of 3D vector mode 7 graphics for the Super NES. It was, I feel, a little gimmicky at the time. I think they could have waited for the next console to put this out. I think it was still too ambitious. And the graphics, as a result, were quite blocky, and I just felt that it was very hard on the eyes. But I mean, I appreciate what they did. You could see the love that they put into it. It's not an ugly game by any means, but in my opinion, the graphics could have been a little bit better. So I'm going to give it a like.
All right.
I was tinkering with a half like, but I figured that was too harsh. So
a like is a like is a like.
Moving on to music. What did you think of the music in Star Fox?
I think the music was great. Very reminiscent of the JRPGs from back in the day, and even some of the games that are being created today. Very heavily militant, a lot of drums, a lot of horns, synthesized obviously. It really gets you into that military feel, battle-themed game out there. And it does its job. I enjoyed it. The first level, again, for a lot of games, that first level, when you really get into it and it's a game that you love, the music just becomes part of that experience and part of that nostalgia. As you play on, it's not that there is a huge variety of music, but I enjoyed the music. I think it didn't take away from anything, and it wasn't mind-blowing. My rating for this would be a retro love.
Nice. I like that. Alright, so for me, music, I had an epic feel to it. It was very grandiose. Grandiose. There's nothing about it that stood out to me. It worked for the context of the game. It's not something that I would hum or remember after playing the game. It's not that memorable. The music worked for the game. It was fun. It had a adventure style to the music. It felt, as I said, epic. It did its job. It works. So I will give it a double like.
Okay.
I feel like I'm bashing this game.
We're trying not to look at this strictly through, retro goggles. We are honestly trying to rate it as per what it felt like back then to play, what it feels like now to play and to listen to, and the experiences kind of pulled through that time frame. If we were to talk to my 14-year-old self about Star Fox, I'd be all over the walls. I loved the game. Now being older, going back and playing and looking at it, it's like, yeah, it did its job.
Yeah, I agree, and I kind of curious, how would I have reacted to this game as a younger person playing it in an era where this is, standard, where you haven't seen this kind of thing. It's like, Star Wars when it came out, it was groundbreaking. Yep. Now, if it comes out now, it's like, okay, big deal, we've seen it, So moving on to sound effects. What do you think of the sound effects in Star Fox, CK?
Star Fox sound effects. Pew, pew, pew. That literally sums up the whole game.
Yeah. So moving on to gameplay.
It was again, they really pushed the limits of that game and the space provided. Honestly and truly, most of the levels, you're in space shooting rocks and shooting ships. The explosions all sound the same. The collisions sound the same. There's nothing crazy different about it. And going back to some of those older mid-80s Nintendo games, the sounds were just there. They created a reaction for you to know that there was some type of condition met. Whether a character's throwing a sword or whether a brick falls or whether a bad guy dies. It's just there. So how would I rate it? I give it a half like. I don't like it, but I don't loathe it. This just feels like Star Wars. Pew, pew, pew. Yeah. That's all it is. Half like for me.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, so for sound for me, it's basic and standard. The more I played it, the more I kind of got annoyed by the jibber jabber. There are some voice acting, actual words being said.
Actual words.
So so I wish they had done a little more of that, because there's not a lot of dialogue, and I think the jibber jabber was a little annoying, especially since it happens quite frequently and it kind of distracts you. Maybe if they did some beeping or they did some, like a buzzer sound when it came something else, like more like a electronical instead of like boop 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 instead of words. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. And there is a lot of blaster sounds. It is basically a Star Wars kind of game. Most of the time you're hearing the blaster noise and it kind of sounds a little staticky, hissy maybe. I don't know.
Hissy, yeah.
So I really wish they polished that a little bit more, since it's such a big element in the game. Like choo 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 instead of shh shh shh.
Yeah.
And that's the thing you hear the most. So it needs to be clear and concise and sound like what it's supposed to sound like. I think, how hard is it to make a blaster sound, especially on a Super NES? With that all being said, I was kind of laughing in the back of my head when you said half like, because that's what I was going to give it. So I'm going to stick with that, and I'm giving it a half like.
That works for me. One thing that kind of add to the sound effects bit in it, do you recall when you're heading out it says good luck?
Yeah.
That good luck thing has always stuck with me since I played Star Fox. It's actually a response that I would use, with friends and people in general. Whenever it came to me having to say good luck to someone, I would use the Star Fox good luck. And anyone who knew the game would look over and smile, because they're like, oh, I know where you got that from.
It's like a sarcastic good luck. It's not a good luck.
It's almost like a sarcastic. Yeah,
it is a sarcasm. It's snarky. It's like good luck. And then I'm out. You play this game because you're going to have a lot of trouble, man. And you could hear that in Good Luck.
You think maybe it came off that way because maybe it was kind of intended that way? It's kind of like, you're out there.
For sure.
And you can die, well, good luck.
I believe that it was intentional. Anyways, moving on to gameplay. What did you think of the gameplay in this game?
I enjoyed the gameplay. In a sense, I guess back then, limited, because it wasn't like a full 3D. It was kind of like a shooter on rails, like third-person style. So you got the pan to the left and the right and up and down. Very similar to like games like the Genesis game Space Harrier. That same one with the guy with the jet backpack and the gun in his hand. It makes for shooting, like the perspective of shooting, a bit difficult, because you have to really focus on, as you're moving your ship, your laser beam has like a direct path directly away from the ship. So there's fixed point between your ship and the end of where your laser shot is. And once you kind of get used to that, it doesn't seem as hard as people say it is. And then others that just don't get used to it, and they're like, I can't tell if I'm hitting, I don't know how far away they are, I don't know where my shot is going, and it's one of those difficult things. Plus the inverted gameplay where, people, when they play any type of flying game, whether it's a first person or a third person style, you're playing like flight stick style. So pressing down is actually down and up, and pulling back is up. And you kind of get used to it after a while. It becomes second nature. And outside of that, just flying up and down, left and right, it felt so smooth. As choppy as the frame rate was, you can feel the plane. Like, you can gauge the weight. It didn't feel like it was a paper plane. It actually had movement to it, some feel as you moved left and right, up and down across the levels. Judging how close you are to certain buildings and certain things falling, yeah, it's tricky, and you kind of figure it out as you go. So it's got its positives, it's got a few of its drawbacks in the gameplay, but it is still good, and it gets a double like for me.
That's fair. Anyways, my turn. Gameplay. So, I don't know if you know about me. I mentioned it before. I'm not really a big fan of shooters on rails. Rail games really annoy me. I like it where you can move around and change direction or go backwards and stuff like that, have full control. I don't really enjoy that kind of gameplay where you're on a rail where you can't stop moving. So, it's not going to be the kind of gameplay that I enjoy. So, I'm going to give it a retro hate. No, I'm joking. There's no retro hate. It's a low. I already forgot. We haven't given a retro love since the other game that should not be mentioned.
Should not be mentioned, yes.
Yeah, so it's not terrible. I just find it a little bit not my style of gameplay.
It's not your style.
It's basic. You're moving forward. You have a lot of things flying around you. You got a lot of buildings falling, and you got a lot of stuff coming at you. It gets a little repetitive, in my opinion, and you don't have any real auto locks. A lot of times I feel it's not user friendly, and it takes a while to really get comfortable and know what you're doing, where I feel like I'm playing the game. It's like, what am I doing? Am I shooting? Is anything making contact? Are these buildings falling on their own? Or are they falling because I'm shooting them? And I just felt like I wasn't in control of what's going on the screen. I didn't really feel like I was making an impact, and I just didn't enjoy it as much as I felt I should have enjoyed it, if that makes any sense. I think it does. So for me, I'm going to give the gameplay a half like.
Half-like?
Yeah, I give it a half like. I don't like shooters on rails, and because of that, it takes away from it, so I have to give it a half like. So anyways, moving on to controls. What do you think of the controls in Star Fox, CK?
Well, I did touch on it kind of at the end of my little gameplay bit there, but yeah, the controls are something that you definitely feel out. You get used to it or you don't. The limited movement, I guess you would call it, the rail system, truly does restrict the true feeling of being able to manipulate your ship because you're locked in on this screen. And I even think, like, I mean, when you go to the left and to the right, it really doesn't even pan that much beyond the screen. You really are locked into this tunnel of action, and you're at the mercy of whatever's in front of you because you're only flying as fast as the screen allows you to. Even if when you use the boost, you only boost far in the screen of speed, which is whatever it's pushing you at. So controls are okay. I'm not even going to go really into any other details because, quite frankly, it's pretty standard. If anyone's played a flying game, it plays like any other flying game, except that this is rails versus full 3D, 360 degrees, I should say. And I'm going to give it a like. I'd still play this game, and I still rock it out. So I have no problems with that, and a like is what I'm going to stick with.
Cool, that's fair. Nothing wrong with that. So, controls for me. To be honest, there were times where I just felt they weren't very responsive to moving side to side. I felt like there were times where I felt like I could have dodged a building easier, and I just felt like I was pushing it to the left or right, and I just felt like I wasn't getting the response and the speed that I would need to avoid these buildings and these things that are falling around you. And I just feel like it just wasn't enough of a scale of movement that gave me a feel like I was in complete control. There's a lot of times where I was playing it and I just felt like I can't avoid that building for some reason. Maybe I'm supposed to go up, maybe I'm supposed to go to the side. I don't know. Right away I could tell if the game controls well or not, and I just didn't feel the game controlled as well as I felt it should have controlled. And to be honest, that made the game a lot harder than it could have been. And because of the controls and, just not really telling you where you really have to go. I felt they were so focused on presentation and making this game a unique experience to do with 3D, because most people at the time never seen a 3D game on a console, they forgot that they actually have to make a game that's playable. So the controls for me, I hate to say it, I'm going to have to give it a retro low for controls. Not a double low. So moving on to difficulties. How do you find the difficulty in this game?
The difficulty, I guess for some, from the sounds of it, was really, really, really trying, and for others, it might not be so much. For me, it wasn't incredibly difficult. There is no difficulty adjustment, so, we'll just throw that out there. And as for the progression of difficulty through the game, it does. It truly does get difficult, and it gets difficult in the way that most of these games back in the day, and even some of the games now, do it, which is increased enemy, I guess their efficiency, increased enemy quantity, and a lot of obstacles as you get further in the game. game, there are actually a lot more things floating around in your way for you to worry about while you're shooting. So you're strafing and trying to dodge blocks or asteroids while, multiple enemies are trying to shoot you down. And the progression it's fine. I didn't find that it got incredibly difficult. It just got longer. Levels got longer, more enemies on the screen, and it gets trying at times where you're just like, this is just too much. And if you get killed, it's like, do I really want to go back into that shitstorm? I toughed through it. I cleared it once, but I would never continue to play it. It doesn't have an incredible replay value. And I would give the difficulty a like. I think they did a good job with Star Fox. It scales right, and I give it a retro like.
Awesome. That's cool. All right, so difficulty for me. Oh boy. Oh boy.
Just repeat all the sentiments you've already shared.
Oh my god. I feel like I'm totally hating on this game. I'm looking at my scores and they just keep on going down. It's not a crazy difficult game by any stretch of the imagination, but because of the gameplay limitations, and they make it harder for you to play because they don't really give you a lot of instructions, and I feel this game needed more instructions and more arrows telling you where you have to go, and less jibber jabber, and more actual words on the screen, or more audible words. I think it was just too ambitious. There were a lot of things that they couldn't do, and that created a game where they weren't holding your hand, and it's fine for some games, but this game really needed you to get that hand held for the first level at the very least, to know what you're doing throughout the game. I know it's pretty standard and basic. It's like we're shooting objects, you're shooting other enemies or planes, there's things falling on you, explosions, I guess, but I mean, it is pretty straightforward, but they're not really telling you what you're supposed to shoot at. And I just feel you're shooting at things just to shoot at stuff, and it doesn't feel that it even shooting at you. It's just very basic. Because the game wasn't meant for a 3D experience, they were cheating in the sense they were using the Mode 7, which is not really meant to be used in that way, because it was very limiting, and it just was almost like a cheat, and they should not have used it for an actual complete game, and that's why it didn't really work. It really only should be used to enhance certain elements, like in Alien Wars, where that was used really well, but this game, everything was Mode 7. Mode 7 was a gimmick. It was great, but to build a game around it, no, sorry, it just did not work. So for me, I'm going to give it a half like. I was tempted to give it a Loath. It would have been a lot easier if this game was put on a system that could handle 3D graphics. Yep. That's all I'm saying. It just felt like someone who made this game was like a giddy school kid saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool to do a game in 3D, and let's do it. And I was like, maybe you should wait. No, let's just do it because I have to have my cake and eat it too, and I can't wait. I'm not patient enough. 3D graphics are coming. It's right around the corner. But the corner was not as close as they thought it would be. That's my opinion. Bashing this game. This is a game we should not mention ever. The game that should not be mentioned.
This game is far from that game that should not be mentioned.
I know. Yeah, so moving on to fun factor. What did you think of the fun factor in Star Fox, CK?
The game is fun to play when you're not dying. For me, it was a fun game when you're not suffering with controls and frame rate and just can't get it. It worked for some and it didn't work for others. It worked for me, so I give it a double like because that's my fun factor.
I think we know who scored higher in this review. So fun factor for me, I wrote in my notes, not a lot. Not a lot of fun. It's a unique game. It's fun in the sense that it's something different. But either way, I don't like rail games. Never did. Don't know why. But I just explained it, so I do know why. There are fun elements. The explosions look kind of cool. Some of the characters, I like them. They're cute, you know? Totally. And the graphics are colorful. It's not a brutal game to look at. The frame rate isn't very good, and the pop-up is really bad. But that's understandable because, it's a system that couldn't handle 3D. So it's not like it's a terrible game. It's not terribly unfun. It's just not a game that I would play. So I'm just going to give it a like. I give them respect for what they were trying to do, and they pulled it off to some degree magically because I don't think the system should have been able to handle it. They obviously tried. They don't deserve hate. They had good intentions, so when you have good intentions, you can't bash that. So I'll give an extra point for good intentions. So it's a like instead of a half like because I really was leaning toward the half like. But moving on, is there a story in this game, CK?
Yeah, there was a story in this. Basically, basically, you are Star Fox. I guess the leader of a group of anthropomorphic species. Foxes, frogs, birds, rabbits, the whole nine. You're fighting against an evil adversary, Andros, who is basically trying to take over the, lack of a better term, universe by moving system to system and gaining political and military control. It's base for me. So I give it a like because I like two of those elements. One, space adventure, and two, anthropomorphic creatures.
The world would be such a better place if all humans had furs and paws. Alright, so for story, there really isn't that much of a story for me to really review, and I'm kind of getting a little redundant on this, so I'm going to give it a half like, because, yeah, there's no progression in story. So, moving on. So, this is the portion of the review where we talk about the influence score, and we're going to do that and do it in 20 seconds.
Yep.
What do you think of the influence? 0, 1 to 2.
I give the influence a 1 due to the fact that this was the, prototype for the delivery of games like Doom on the SFX chip, the Dirt Racer, and the other games that I mentioned earlier in the podcast. So it does have some influence because it really did set the groundwork for a lot of games developed with this chip on this console.
I think that was 20 seconds. Cool. I would give it actually, after all the loathing, I should give it a 2 because I think it was very influential in the sense that it was pioneered the 3D genre of gaming and introduced it to the next generation and made people want to see it more of it, So I thought it was quite influential. Alright, so this is the portion of the review where we tabulate our scores. So what did you score, CK?
I scored 28.
I got a 20. Alright, so you flipped last time, so I'll flip this time. And heads is high.
Heads is high.
It's tails.
It's tails. All right. You've got the selection. What are your 2 games, RL?
So my choice will be the first Mario game for the NES, Super Mario Bros.
Nice.
And for the Super NES, Super Mario World. I really want to review a Mario game for our 10th review. So it's a bit of a milestone for us, our 10th Retro Life review.
For sure.
So leave a comment below and let us know which of the Mario games you want us to review. Alright, it was nice to have you again, CK.
Thank you for having me.
Always fun. So we will have more Retro Life reviews in the weeks, months, and years to come. Bye for now.
Ciao, folks. Good luck.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Couldn't they record it again to be less snarky?
Good luck.